Welcome to The Rest of the Moose,
Where's the rest of this moose?
a podcast about anything and everything.
You must have hated this moose.
Here's your host, Chris Grum.
This will not be the last time I say this during this podcast. You have been warned. There will be spoilers aplenty coming up here as we do a deep dive into the new movie Wicked. It actually hits theaters this Friday, the 22nd, but I was invited to a advanced screening last night and was lucky enough to get to see this film that I have been waiting for 20 years, 21, since the stage show came out. I've loved the stage show from day one, and I was always wondering, how are they going to do this on film? Is it going to be an animated film? Is it going to be a film that stars the original stars? And maybe 15, 17 years ago, Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth could have done the film. But I'm glad they waited, and I'm glad they took their time, because they have, as you might have listened to my non-spoiler podcast, they have nothing short of a masterpiece in my mind on their hands. This film is a 5-star film to me. It is absolutely outstanding. I can't say enough good things about it. And the more I think about it, other than a couple of little minor quibbles here and there, which are nitpicky things, I think the film is more than I could have ever asked for, and is really just beautifully realized by John M. Chu and the entire cast and crew. So this is not going to be a review, because if you want my review, you can listen to the other podcast. But we're going to do a deep dive into some of the things that I absolutely loved about this film. And I'm going to start with the casting, because when they announced Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, I kind of went, oh, I don't know about this. And I'll tell you why. I was never in the camp of Idina and Kristen need to make the movie, because on the stage you can play younger when you're older, and most of the time you need somebody that does, because let's face it, the vocals for these two characters are insane, and you can't take most 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds and put them in these roles. They're just not ready. You need somebody that is a seasoned professional. And so on the stage, it makes a lot more sense that somebody playing Elphaba is 25, 30, sometimes 35. It just makes a lot of sense. Now, Cynthia Erivo is an interesting person. I don't know her personally. I've never met her. I've never really been a huge fan of hers. I saw The Color Purple and enjoyed it. I thought on the stage she was great. Sometimes off stage, she says some things that have a scratch in our heads. And there was a big controversy with Wicked, and somebody did some fan art and changed a look of a poster, and she got all offended. And I don't even want to get into that whole thing, other than to say, you just kind of sit there and you go, when you've got a big movie coming out and this is a chance for you to go from star to superstar, maybe it's not the best time to pick a fight with somebody who was, as the person said, just trying to create fan art. But we'll leave that where it is. But it kind of rubbed me the wrong way just a little bit, as it did a lot of the fans. And so I was concerned about how I would feel about her in the film. And I will say, the minute she walks on the screen, I forgot all about that. And while she does have a little bit of a different take on Elphaba, I thought she did a great job overall. There are times where I didn't think she did the songs as the best version I've ever heard of them, if that's a way to explain it. But I thought she did a great job overall. And the thing you have to understand about the songs is, and I think it was very wise of them not to release the soundtrack until the film came out. We've heard little snippets of the songs, but these are songs that in the context of the film work well. But if you were to listen to them by themselves, you might find them lacking in maybe in energy or in how they sound, because you're not getting the visual and the acting that goes with it. And so, that's one of those things that I think will be, people will listen to Defying Gravity or The Wizard and I, and without the visuals and without the context, they may not work as well as the Broadway album does. And so that's something just to kind of put in the corner and think about. But I thought Erivo did a very nice job with her role, and I found her sympathetic. I found her to hit all the right notes as Elphaba, but it is a bit of a different twist on how she approaches it than we maybe have seen on stage. Now, Ariana Grande was at the first my bigger concern, because yes, she has a singing career, but was never really not known for her acting per se. She was more known as a singer. And Glinda has a lot of very operatic songs, especially No One Mourns the Wicked. And there's another one in Act 2 or Film 2 where she's really got to be operatic. And she nailed it. Now, I'm assuming that we're taking them at their word and that everybody sang what they sang. If that's really her voice, wow. Blown away. I had a certain bar set for her, and I was hoping she just met it. Not only did she meet it, she blew it out of the water in my mind. And I thought that she did a wonderful job with Glinda or Galinda, whichever way you want to go with it. I've always had an issue with that because if you think about it for a second, she's Galinda, and then she changes her name to Glinda. And she says the G is silent. Well, if the G in Glinda is silent, she's just Linda. Right? I mean, is that just her being an airhead like she is as the character? Anyway, I digress. I thought she did a phenomenal job. I really was impressed with Ariana Grande. And she also finds a different beat for Glinda than we've seen in the stage show. She plays it very well, but she doesn't play it always for laughs and doesn't play it always. Just a little bit of a different take to it. And I will say, because we're talking about the script and the lines, I don't remember a single line from the stage show that's missing, especially the big punch-up lines, the jokes, the major quotes that everybody knows. I think they were all in the film. And then they also added to it some very funny and some very touching lines here and there that are not in the stage show. And again, what they've done with this film in general, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. 10 minutes of that is credits at the end. So really 2:30. That is the length of the stage show, and we only have half of it in the film. And we were all worried about that. Are they going to be able to earn the 2 films? Well, they did. And the way that they did it was by letting it all breathe. And so when a song is played, it might be 4 or 5 minutes on the stage show. It's 10 in the film, but you don't feel like they did it just to expand. And I'll give you some examples as we go along. I thought I might go kind of scene by scene and give you my take on what I thought of each of the scenes and what they were doing within the film. So the film opens with No One Mourns the Wicked. And that is what opens the stage show as well. And we are we're just past where Elphaba has been melted by Dorothy. And they're announcing that the Wicked Witch is dead. And so that's basically how the film opens and how the stage show opens. Within that number, I really love the visuals of it because it takes place in Munchkinland, and we get to see the Yellow Brick Road, and we get to see the Munchkinland that we know from the Wizard of Oz 1939 film, but expanded for 2024. And that was one of the beautiful things of this film is, from a visual point of view, they managed to keep the same look from the original film, but make it modernized, but not in a bad way, if that makes sense. In other words, we see the Munchkinland from 1939, and we know they only had a certain budget. They only had a certain ability to do certain things, and they were still, doing color for the first few times. They have taken that and grown it and made it bigger. So we get to see, almost if you think about, in the first movie, it was just that little swirl of the Yellow Brick Road. Now imagine if you could span that out for several city blocks. That's kind of where I'm going with this. They just made it bigger, and the sets are beautiful. The film just looks so stunning. So No One Mourns the Wicked is pretty much like it is in the stage show. What they do wind up doing in that number is expanding a little bit on the whole Elphaba's childhood and seeing her, and this happens later in the film too. We get to see her as a young girl and see her bullied a bit more and see where some of her, what's going to become her later, comes from. It's not just a one note of the people at Shiz giving her a hard time and her being green. We get to see a little bit more of that backstory. I think that really helps. Another thing I was concerned about in No One Mourns the Wicked, for those of you, and again, this is full of spoilers, so I'm warning you now. For those of you that know the stage show, you know that the wizard shows up in No One Mourns the Wicked. Now, we don't know at the time it's the wizard. We just know that it's somebody that her mother's having an affair with, and ultimately, it's why she winds up green. In the stage show, the way that they stage that is the wizard comes up out of the stage, if you're on Broadway, And on the tour, he comes out from the side, but he never faces the audience. And quite frankly, it's not even the actor that plays the wizard. It's just a double. But you never get to see that person's face. And in the film, I was like, okay, well, they could obviously do that too, but how are they going to play this? And they managed to make it a fluid scene where it moves a lot, but you never see the face. And I don't know if it was really Goldblum or if it was a double, but it works. Now, he does have lines there, singing. And since I knew, obviously, that it was the wizard, I could hear Goldblum's voice. But it's not so obvious that if you didn't know the twist, you would notice it. I think most people will pass that over and not realize who it is. Now, when I first saw the Broadway show, actually before I saw the Broadway show, I listened to the cast recording, and when I heard Joel Grey's voice as the wizard, I went, wait a minute, why is he here? What is this? And so I kind of put two and two together pretty quickly. It'll be interesting to see if people who've never seen Wicked can figure out that twist that early in the film. But I thought they did a good job of hiding who it was within that scene. Now, No One Mourns the Wicked is played as a prologue. The film does not open with the title. It opens with the old Universal logo, which I thought was a brilliant, nice little touch to make us feel like we were going back to the old days. The film opens with Elphaba's hat, the melting, and then going into No One Mourns the Wicked. When that number ends and we go back in time to Shiz, which is where the witches meet, as Galinda is taking the boat to Shiz, that is when we finally see the title of the film. The camera pans across her and up to the Emerald City, or up to Shiz, I guess, and we see Wicked Part 1. And one of the many Easter eggs to The Wizard of Oz is that title. It is not in the font that we're used to on the poster for Wicked. It is in the Wizard of Oz movie font. And I love that little nod to the Wizard of Oz, that even the title card is old school, if you will. Just a nice little touch. And for those wondering, yes, it does say Part 1, clear as a bell, up on the screen when it starts. And then that visual shot of them going to Shiz is just... The whole Shiz set is unreal. It's so hard to really put it into words how amazing it is. But it just is a super cool shot. So then we get into the song Dear Old Shiz, which is pretty much more or less straight out of the musical and pretty much plays the same role of having Elphaba arrive and everybody's kind of her. Now, what's interesting about her arrival is they changed it up a little bit. She's not initially going to stay at Shiz. She's never supposed to be a student. Instead, she's just there to help her sister get there, and then she's going to leave. And then, of course, the magic happens where she has to cast a spell accidentally, and then Madame Morrible sees it and says, well, you should be a student too and stick around. So they changed that up a little bit, but that also allows for a little bit more development, and it makes more sense as to why she's there. They've also expanded the role for Galinda's friends, Pifani, I think that's how you say it, and Shin Shin. They're characters that are in the musical, and they have a line here or a line there. They are very much kind of her clique, if you will, and they have expanded and play a big role in the film and help expand Galinda's character arc, if you will. Now at Shiz, I just think that the visuals, the sets, and the look of Shiz, because we had never seen Shiz before. We've seen it on the stage, but we've never seen it on film. And I really was impressed with how they made the sets, the bedrooms, the classrooms. Everything was a bit of a nod to the stage show, but also its own element, and just so beautifully done. The next big number is The Wizard and I. And when Michelle Yeoh comes out and talks to Elphaba, it's very much like it's done in the stage show. The song is staged in and around Shiz, and then I don't know why she wound up going where she goes at the end of the song out to this big canyon, but it's very well done, and it really builds well. I really like the overall visual of The Wizard and I. It's a song that I've always loved because I love the twist of the lyrics in it. In the bridge where she talks about, someday there'll be a big celebration throughout Oz. Well, she's right. And when the people see me, they will scream. Again, right. Very clever lyrics, but not for the reasons she's thinking. She's thinking she's going to be a star, and they winds up being afraid of her. The next song in the film is What Is This Feeling, which is, some people call it Loathing. I loved how they filmed this with split screen, and then also just the way that they played it out through all of Shiz University. It's, again, more or less the song from the stage show, but when you can put it on film and you can change locations quickly and also bring us closer to these two characters instead of having them on two sides of the stage, it works very, very well. A song that changed a bit, not in lyrics or its meaning, but in how they put it together, is Something Bad. And that is a song that in the stage show is Dr. Dilliman, Peter Dinklage, who I really love that they used his voice with the CGI goat, Dr. Dilliman. But usually that's a song where they're having lunch, he and Elphaba, and they're talking about the fact that the animals are losing their voices and somebody is suppressing the animals in Oz. They have changed this song a bit in how it's played in the film. It's actually played in two parts. And the first part of it is when Dr. Dilliman is hosting a clandestine meeting of all the animals who are trying to figure out what's going on in Oz and trying to figure out who is suppressing them. And so I loved that the first part of the song where he's talking about the owl that can't do anything but screech and the different things in the first part of the song are Dr. Dilliman talking to his animal friends and saying, look what's happening around us. This is not good. Who is doing this? And then Elphaba, who's trying to follow him and talk to him, is watching the meeting, and then they get together at the end after all the other animals have left, and she says, well, this can't really be happening. We need to talk to the wizard. And so that's how that number plays out. One of the things that has always bothered me about the stage show is the book Wicked is very much about the plight of the animals and suppression and, you know, the authority state pushing down on the animals to try to keep them in line, if you will. And on the stage show, Dr. Dilliman is starting to lose his voice. And so he'll say something bad, something very bad, and it gets a laugh. It's not supposed to be funny. And it's always kind of bothered me when people laugh at that line because they don't get what's going on there. And I can understand why they laugh, but they don't catch the meaning behind it. The movie has fixed that in my mind because, number one, when we see those scenes and the animals are concerned, it is not played for comedy. And so you totally get why when he does it the first time, you go, oh my gosh, he's losing his voice too. This is sad. It works so much better and it serves the story better because it's done that way. And that new scene was crucial. And again, there's not a moment in this film where I was sitting there during the 2 hours and 40 minutes going, well, why did they add this? Or this is going on too long, or this doesn't work. Everything was earned in those moments. And that's what I really thought made part one deserve to be its own film. Now, the next song after that is Dancing Through Life, and that is when Jonathan Bailey, who plays Fiyero, and by the way, plays him very well. He comes from Bridgerton, for those of you that don't know. And I was concerned because I didn't know if he could sing or not. And I'd heard just a short clip of Dancing Through Life, which again, when it's outside the context of the film, it didn't quite have the energy that the Broadway one had. And I was just a bit concerned. But now seeing it in context, no issues whatsoever. Works perfectly. He is Fiyero. He's got the swagger. He's got the looks, obviously. He played the character so well, and I can't wait to see what happens in part two with him playing it. But Dancing Through Life was a lot of fun. They have expanded it. I think maybe on the cast recording, it's probably a good 7 to 8 minutes because it's where Elphaba gets the hat and where Nessarose gets asked out by Bach. And all of that is there, but it's expanded even further. And so when we go to the scene where they discover the hat and then wind up giving it to Elphaba, that is just allowed to breathe just a little bit more. And it makes that moment even more earned. And I really love that they just allowed it to go because they could have very well made this one movie and it would have been rushed. It would have been boom, 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 boom. And I think back to one of my favorite 80s miniseries was Shogun. And when Shogun was first broadcast, it was 12 hours over 5 nights. and it was an epic story. And then they went and made a 2.5-hour movie version of it. And if you'd seen the original, you're watching it and going, literally, there's 5 seconds of a character here, 5 seconds here. And those were 30 to 45 minutes in the expanded version. That's kind of what Wicked has done, is they've just allowed it to breathe and allowed it to develop. And I say that over and over again, but it really is true. And I think it's the difference between what would have been a good film and what is a great film. Now, after Dancing Through Life, and we get to the Ozdust Ballroom, one of the most beautiful moments in this first film for me was the scene where Elphaba walks in wearing the hat that she thinks is supposed to be great, and then everybody's laughing at her, and she decides to go out on the dance floor, and to hell with you, I'm going to dance my way. And at first, everybody's laughing at her, and then Glinda realizes that she's caused that scorn, and goes out and starts to mimic Elphaba's dancing to make it cool. And then suddenly, because Glinda's doing it, everybody's doing it. That moment on the stage show is, I think, a beautiful moment when you see it on stage. But on film, it works, to my mind, another maybe 2 or 3 notches better. And part of the reason is the emotion that the two ladies show in that scene. Cynthia Erivo does something, there's tears on her face. And we can't see that in the stage show, even if they were there. And just the close-ups that they can do of the two of them in that scene make it work so much better on film. And it's effective on the stage. But it is a Kleenex moment in the film because it is so well done. And those are the things that a film can bring you that the stage show can't. And that's also why sometimes the songs are just pulled back a little bit, or the jokes or the lines are pulled back just a little bit, because you don't have to play them as broadly on the film. But I really loved how that whole scene progressed and how it all worked out. The Ozdust Ballroom is very cool as well, just the visuals of the whole nightclub scene. Then that brings us to Popular. And Popular is always a popular song on the stage because it's hilarious. It's Glinda's chance to shine, and boy does she. And Ariana Grande milks every possible moment out of this song, and it never goes too much. It is just the right amount of too much for Popular. The song is staged beautifully. They do a lot of things that you just can't do in the stage show with the scenic elements of how they do this song. It works perfectly. The reaction shots on Cynthia Erivo of Elphaba are so funny when Ariana's doing her thing and Elphaba's like, really? You're going to do this to me? It is a well-done number, and I think I've seen the stage show so many times that Popular to me kind of almost became blasé, because I've seen some actresses that made it their own, and I've seen some that just did carbon copies. This is obviously the way it's written, but she found her own little touches within this song, and it's very fun the way it's done, and just the way it's shot also, certain overhead shots and certain shots this way, and just the way Ariana plays it. I thought that if she's going to earn herself some awards, Popular is one of the places where she will earn that. Another scene that is in the stage show, obviously, but is played differently in the movie, and I think is another brilliant nod to The Wizard of Oz, is the scene with the lion cub. So Dr. Dillamond is fired and taken away to places we don't know until the second film. And in his place, they bring in these kind of Gestapo-looking guys that are going to be the teachers, and they open up the cage, and there's a lion cub in there. And spoiler, the cowardly lion, because he's been stuck in a cage. And they're talking about how animals need to be in cages for their own good, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And if we leave him in here, he'll never learn to talk. And it's obvious that Elphaba's upset by this. Now, in the stage show, she casts her magic. There's kind of a lighting effect, and everybody's knocked out except for her and Fiyero, and they take the cub away. In this movie version, the same thing happens, but they found a different way to do it. When she first meets Dr. Dillamond, he has beautiful poppy flowers throughout his classroom. And Elphaba remarks, "Oh, what beautiful poppies." And he says, "Yes, they're my favorite." Now, of course, in The Wizard of Oz, where do they fall asleep? In the poppy field. And so Elphaba uses the poppies to put everybody to sleep in the classroom so that they can make their escape at the Lion Club, or the Lion Cub, rather. I thought it was a clever way to solve how to do that in the classrooms. I was wondering, how are they going to do this? They can't just do a lighting effect and everybody's knocked out. And it's also a wonderful throwback to the original Wizard of Oz. I thought that was absolutely brilliantly done. Once they get into the forest, I'm Not That Girl comes along. And that's a song that's okay. It's never been one of my favorites, but I thought it was maybe Cynthia's best vocal moment in the show. There's a low note at the end of I'm Not That Girl that I've always wondered why he wrote it to go low. And a lot of people can't pull it off, or it doesn't sound right. And it's not necessarily the singer. It's just a weirdly written note. She nailed that. And I thought the scene was very well done. And it brings us into her head about how she's feeling about Fiyero and that he'll never love her. Really, really, really well done. And then that brings us to One Short Day, which is very expanded for the film. And here comes some major spoilers again. If you're getting to the point now where you're ruining the whole movie, well, I told you that I was going to tell you everything. But in One Short Day, they have not only brought us into the Emerald City and given us what the stage show gives us, but then in spades with this massive set and the amazing things going on around it. But they've also added a song in the middle that is not in the stage show. So in the stage show, they go to see Wizamania, and you get Who's That Sage, Who's Major Itinerarius, that whole thing. That's supposedly in the stage show, the song from Wizamania. It's not in the film. And in fact, when they go to see the show in the Emerald City, there's a whole nother song that's wedged in the middle of One Short Day. And it is where the two cameos that everybody was waiting for happen. And it's a show with an MC, and he's talking about how the Wizard of Oz got there. And then out come two ladies, Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, the original Elphaba and Glinda. And everybody knew that they were probably going to be in the film, that there was going to be a cameo. And I think a lot of people expected we'd see them in the background, or they might have one line, or they'd pop up somewhere just for a moment. They are in this film for a good couple of minutes. They have songs. They sing together. They play off of the old, there was a story for a long time that they hated each other and that they got jealous of each other around Tony time and that they can't stand each other. And they kind of play off of that riff in the movie in a fun way. But it's nice to see both of them. And when you see them on film, you think two things. Number one, the crowd went nuts. It was really cool to see them. But then you look at them and you go, my gosh, you're both in your 40s. I think maybe Chenoweth might be even pushing 50. I'd have to look up their ages. But it shows on screen. And I don't mean that as a disrespect. I just mean that as they would not have been able to play these characters 21 years later. It just would not have worked. But the characters that they do play, it works perfectly. And they get to sing with their counterparts in One Short Day. And it's one of those things where, yes, they could have left that out and we would have never known any better. But it's almost a love letter to the fans of the musical and to the people that said, I want to see these two in the movie. And they are clearly having a good time. And it's clear that they still love each other. And if there was any animosity, it's in the past. But it's just a beautiful moment in the film. And I really love that they included that. Oh, and I should mention that in One Short Day, at the end of that segment, when the wizard will see you now, pay attention to that face because you might recognize him. It's Stephen Schwartz, the composer, gets that one line, the wizard will see you now. He's the guard inside the door from the Wizard of Oz. And I also love how they did that because it was another nod to the Wizard of Oz. In the stage show, he walks up and escorts them to the wizard. In this, he's inside the door, inside the little window that opens up, just like in the original Wizard of Oz. And it's quite clear that John M. Chu loves that film and found every way he could to do a bow or a nod to it without making it too much or too often. It works because they do it in the right place and in the right times. And then that brings us to the Wizard's Chamber, and we know we're getting close to the end of the film at this point. And so I was kind of getting a little bit sad when they finally made it to the Wizard. The Wizard's Hall and everything are exactly as you would expect. The monkeys are lining it as they walk in. And this is where it starts to get serious, where the film really kind of drops the comedy for the most part and takes the serious tone. when they finally meet the wizard, he comes out from behind the curtain. There is an extended moment there before we get to Sentimental Man, which is Jeff Goldblum's, and I didn't even call it a song. It's like 3 or 4 lines, but his one number in Act 1 or Film 1. But they take the time to let it breathe again and let us see a little bit more of the wizard. And he's contemplating, what color should the road to Oz be? He's like, here's the newest innovation in Oz. It's going to be a road. That way we all know where to go. But what color should it be? And I'm doing it terrible justice. It's not that corny or hokey. It works beautifully. But they get to play around with the colors of the road. And it's fun because we know what it's going to be. But at the time, he doesn't. And then Sentimental Man comes in. And, if there was ever a song that really, really tells you the plot points, if you're paying attention, the Sentimental Man who always longed to be a father, and then daughter when he points at her. I don't know that they could beat people over the head more obviously with it, but still people miss the references. But that's there. And then here comes Madame Morrible, Michelle Yeoh, and we got to get her to read the Grimoire because we want to cast the spell. Now, what I thought played very well and somewhat violently, and I'm glad it had that, is when Chistery grows his wings from the levitation spell. In the stage show, he writhes around a little bit and he's in pain. They really emphasize that in the film. And then when you cut to the hallway and dozens of monkeys are out there suffering because they're growing wings, I thought that really drove home the message of these animals are being mistreated and it's the wizard. And it was uncomfortable, but I thought it had to be, because that really drives home something the one thing I think the stage show is lacking in, and that is the seriousness of that plot. So we get past that, and then of course we're getting to the big number, which is Defying Gravity, and it more or less works like it does in the stage show. They go up to the attic, if you will, of the wizard's castle. And they put the broom in the door, and then Defying Gravity starts. That scene also is played out a lot longer, getting them to the upper level. It involves the wizard's balloon and the guards chasing them. So that scene, again, is expanded. It's not just them walking off stage and suddenly they're up in the attic. They earn getting there. Defying Gravity, the first part of it is played exactly like the stage show. Then when we get to Madame Morrible's speech, and then we go beyond that, it takes its time to get to the finale, if you will. And I think this is one area where there are going to be some, for lack of a better word, some debates about how this was done. Because I think the purists, the people that want to see the stage show on screen and nothing else, are probably going to have an issue with how this number is done. And I don't have an issue with it because, as I'll explain in a moment, I think they needed to do what they did. But basically, it's the same until we get to the point where Elphaba is going to fly. And on the stage show, it's not me, she has nothing, or not her, she has nothing to do with it, it's me, and then up she goes on the cherry picker. Now, obviously, in the movie, we want her to fly. And the film sets up earlier on that she's working on a levitation spell. She tries to levitate a coin with Madame Morrible and can't quite do it. And then she tries to do the spell for the monkeys with the Grimoire, and then they grow wings. And the monkey flies for a bit, and then he crashes to the ground. And so it's obvious to us, or at least it should be, that she's not quite there with that levitation spell. And then when she does it to the broom, and it flies in, the broom's still not quite flying, and the way that they do it is very clever, and it rolls around, and it doesn't quite just fly to them. So there's some question as to whether or not she's actually going to be able to fly. And when she hops on the broom, she goes out the window and is heading towards the ground. And is she going to crash? What's going to happen? And this is right in the middle of the big finale of Defying Gravity. And Elphaba flashes back to her younger self and the torment she's taking. And she also flashes kind of through all the things she's experienced within the first part of the story. And that is what triggers her ability to fly. And then when she hits it, we get the western sky and all that. But again, that is split up into pieces. And I think there's going to be some people that are like, well, I wanted it all together. But I think it works within the context of the film. And the film ends with her flying off at the end of Flying Gravity with the monkeys chasing her and the wizard after her and all the people after her. And then the title card comes up to be continued. And then the credits start rolling and it's Wicked Part 1 and da-da-da-da-da. So there you go. That is the film. And I've told you most of the major spoilers in it. There's still a few things here and there that you'll discover. And I'm sure there's Easter eggs that I missed the first time because there is so much going on the screen that you really probably want to see it more than once just to look for the different things that you might have missed. But I will say, as I've said in my non-spoiler review, and I've mentioned several times here, I wasn't sure about some of the casting, and I wasn't sure about the making it 2 movies. I eat all those words. I take it back. I'm sorry. I was wrong. John M. Chu, you're a genius, and I want you to direct every movie musical from this point forward because I think you did a phenomenal job. I'm sure there are people that will not like this film. There always are. I'm sure there are people that love Wicked and will still not like this. But I think for the most part, if you're a fan of the musical Wicked, you're going to love what they have done with it. They have honored the stage show. They have been faithful to it. But in my opinion, they have not only made a great film, but they have taken what was a fun, great musical and made it even better on the big screen. And I really think that that's all that any of us could have asked for.
You've been listening to the Rest of the Moose podcast, hosted by Chris Grum.
Why don't you forget the moose for a moment?
Previous episodes are available online at chrisgrum.com. See you next time for the Rest of the Moose.